I'm so not used to having headphones on. So let's just start with a really easy one. Could you introduce yourself to us, please?
Hi, Dina. I'm Paul Nakasone. I was the former commander of U.S. Cyber Command and the director of the National Security Agency.
Excellent. Okay, I think people might recognize the name. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here's Mic Drop, an extended cut of an interview we think you'd like to hear more of. We had a rare one-on-one with General Nakasone last week to talk about all things cyber and intelligence. And in particular, we asked him about the 2024 elections. We're hearing so much in this cycle about Russian influence operations and Chinese hacks that you'd think adversaries are winning the day. But Nakasone says it's just the opposite.
What's different this year is that when we see it, we say something about it.
Stay with us. From Recorded Future News, this is Click Here's Mic Drop. Paul Nakasone is one of America's first cyber warriors, an architect of the military cyber operation we call Cyber Command. I've interviewed him about half a dozen times about everything from cybercom's attacks against ISIS to ransomware operations and disinformation campaigns. He doesn't talk to journalists much, but last week we had a rare sit-down on the sidelines of a supply chain conference in Washington, and he remembered that our last interview at Fort Meade kind of freaked people out.
So we're right now in a beautiful ballroom here in a hotel, but the last time we met, we were in the conference room of the National Security Agency
Yes.
with a number of National Security Agency employees that were very, very nervous that I was actually having a reporter come in and do a live, not a live, but certainly a taped podcast.
Right. Nervous is an understatement. We had all our microphones out to be able to record our greeting with the general, and the staff in the outer office went nuts. "There's no recording here. There's no recording here," they kept saying, wildly waving their hands.
But I think the important piece is twofold. One is that there was a degree of transparency that was set that day, that our agency, our command, had to talk and really tell America what we were doing. And you did that so marvelously in that podcast.
If you saw General Paul Nakasone on the street, you might not recognize him. He retired from the Army back in February, and now, out of uniform, he has kind of a suburban dad vibe. Our interview took place 1 week before the 2024 elections. Can you talk about this year's election? Is it going to be safe and secure? We're hearing so much that suggests that it might not be.
If you take a look at the election history of what we've been able to do as a government, really since 2018, it's a series of safe and secure elections. We began in 2018 with this idea of ensure that we understand our adversaries, we share the information, and we take action if we see adversaries operating outside the United States.
November 2018 is an inflection point because of what had happened 2 years earlier. U.S. intelligence was taken by surprise by the Kremlin's assault on the 2016 presidential elections. It wasn't until that fall that the U.S. realized that Russia's Internet Research Agency used fake accounts and bogus online personas to stir up division in this country. So when that same Russian troll farm tried to do something similar in November 2018, the response was swift. The NSA and Cybercom launched a cyber operation that took out the Internet Research Agency's internet access. And then followed that with something they don't often do. They made the operation public.
There has been an inflection point with regards to how we look at offensive cyberspace operations, and it begins in 2018 with this idea of we're going to have a safe and secure election. And one of the ways that we're going to ensure we have a safe and secure election is if any adversary tries to interfere or influence our election, we're going to operate outside the United States to take them on. And we had both the authorities and the policies that came with that in 2018. That's matured. There has become a greater degree of experience and I think know-how on how to do these operations. I think it has become to the point more accepted. And I think this is one of many options that the president's going to need in the future.
Do you see it as being more accepted now or more turned to as a tool than, say, when we were talking 5 years ago?
Certainly. And I think that the policy and the authorities have changed dramatically. National Security Policy Memorandum 13, which was signed in 2018, the ability for us to look at traditional military activities, cyberspace being part of that, was a congressional part of the NDAA in 2019. Those things ensured that we could do our operations.
In other words, it cleared the way for much more nimble and aggressive U.S. offensive cyber operations. Do you think you'll be more open about them?
I think that we will be, as with any operation, as transparent as we can be, right? And there will be things that we will talk about, and there are things that we won't be able to talk about. But I think that, yes, it won't be as obtuse as perhaps it was 10 years ago.
Nakasone says the U.S. is building on that strategy and being more public about what they see when they see it.
This has been the pattern, 2018, 2020, 2022. What's different this year is the fact that we're hearing so much about so many adversaries at different times. I see this as success. This is exactly what we want to be doing. Instead of 2016, where we knew all this information and didn't share it, no, this is when we see it, we say something about it.
And is what we're doing now in 2024 radically different than what we were doing, say, 4 years ago?
Not radically different, but I would say more informed and better. Why do I say that? We believe that we have greater security through a number of different partnerships. We began with a very, very small set of partners: NSA, Cybercom, FBI, DHS. Now it's the interagency. Now it's private sector. Now it's international partners. And the other thing I would say is that in 2018, when we thought about being able to impact our adversaries or go after them when they try to conduct influence or interference, we do this now in a much more sophisticated way. It's DOD, it's DOJ, it's the private sector. We have become much better at it.
So that's the good news. More partners, a more holistic view of how to respond to threats in cyberspace. The bad news is that one of our adversaries, and we're talking about you, China, seems to be leaning in, developing new skills and broadening the threat.
I think we need to also think about this in the greater context of China as really our pacing challenge. In May of 2023, we talked about a series of actors which we termed Volt Typhoon.
Chinese state-sponsored hackers are sometimes known as the Typhoons. Microsoft researchers gave them that name. And so far, there are 3 Typhoon groups that we know of. Volt Typhoon, which has been known to target U.S. critical infrastructure. Flax Typhoon, which focuses on Taiwan in the U.S. and has compromised a lot of Internet of Things devices, like thermostats. And Salt Typhoon, which appears to have targeted telecom companies and potentially the systems the U.S. uses to conduct court-approved wiretaps. According to a Congressional Research Service report, the concern is that Salt Typhoon may have been able to access voice calls and text messages across a wide swath of Americans. Among the list of phones the group is allegedly targeted, devices used by former President Trump, his family, Vice President Kamala Harris's staff, and dozens of other people who might have had a hand in China policy. The FBI is investigating. And General Nakasone says we need to understand how aggressive China's effort has become and how widespread it is.
This is a scope and scale. This is intelligence gathering. Should we be surprised that unencrypted communications are being intercepted by an adversary? No, we shouldn't. But the scale of it is what is concerning.
Of the Salt Typhoon.
Right. The scale of being in American telecommunications companies. So this portends, what are we going to do now that we've discovered them? And this is really the next step that our government, the private sector need to come together to be able to act on.
What, so everything's encrypted? How would you respond to that?
I think you begin with, how did they get in? Once they begin, let's patch that vulnerability. Let's ensure that we have better understanding of some type of anomalous behavior that alerts us to an adversary trying to do this. Do we need to go to greater encryption? You bet. Do we need to be much more sophisticated in the way that we communicate? Certainly. But it begins by discovering. We've done that. Now it's the action.
Got it. And it seems to me that Salt Typhoon seems more like from the old China playbook, whether, it's Office of Personnel Management. The Office of Personnel Management hack happened back in 2015. Chinese hackers got into government computer systems and stole a trove of personal information. The assumption is that they vacuumed up about 15 years of government background check information that had been housed at OPM.
So I've seen this picture show for well over a decade. Remember, we begin with this idea of gathering intelligence, and then it moves to intellectual property. Then, as you indicated, personal identifiable information. Then it moves to our critical infrastructure. Yes, this is a rheostat of what the options are and what our adversaries are trying to do to us.
Are you surprised about anything that's been happening in the lead up to the election, or is this pretty much what you were expected?
I think the piece that has surprised me, and perhaps pleasantly so, is the fact that our artificial intelligence platforms have become very, very good at the defense. Whether or not it's been OpenAI, whether or not it's been Anthropic, there have been a number of different initiatives that have really paid, I think, dividends in being able to identify adversaries. We always were concerned about artificial intelligence being used in the offensive sense. I think right now what we're seeing is that it's also pretty effectively defensive too.
So, for example, those Russian bots that were trying to sow division in the run-up to the 2016 elections, AI can spot them pretty readily now, which means response time can be much faster.
It's spotting the type of behaviors that we can immediately pinpoint to say, hey, that looks like influence or interference. Let's make sure that, we cancel their account.
Click Here listeners may remember that we spoke with Senator Mark Warner, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, about election interference back in September. And he said that he was most worried about the 48 hours before the election and the 48 hours after. General Nakasone said he thinks the time for concern is a little bit longer than that.
I would say that I'm concerned most about the lead up to the election and then the certification of the votes. It's not necessarily, it could be 48 hours, it could be 48 days, but we have to get the votes certified. This is what completes the entire election process. So we want to ensure that our defenses don't just end on the 5th of November, that it goes through, as I said, towards a certification process.
Congress meets on January 6, 2025 to finalize the election results, and things already feel a little bit unsettled.
Ballot drop boxes on fire, mountains of fake information cluttering the internet, and U.S.
Violent extremists inspired by election-related conspiracy theories pose a major threat to the elections.
These are the things that keep us all up at night.
How do you respond to something like that?
I think the proper way is exactly what CISA is doing, which is to identify it, show it, talk about it. This is where it's coming from. And then to have our leaders talk about it. To see leaders in the United States say, hey, that is disinformation, that's particularly powerful. I think that the piece on the election that really is important to all Americans is this fact that we have become so far in terms of ensuring the safety and security of what's being done, particularly against foreign adversaries. This is a much different field in 2016. We do not see that today. And so I think the confidence as we go to the polls on 5 November really is warranted.
This is Click Here's Mic Drop. Here are some of the top cyber and intelligence stories of the past week.
Secretary Raffensperger is warning about a new election disinformation campaign in Georgia.
It's Election Day, which, if recent cycles are any indication, has meant some incident is going to come out of left field to cast doubt on the process. This year, a lot of those events appear to be the handiwork of a Russian disinformation gang called Storm 1516. Their specialty appears to be fake whistleblower videos. Someone who appears to be revealing some election fraud, or a CIA plot to defeat Trump, or a fabricated hit and run linked to Vice President Harris. Storm 1516 has produced dozens of fake narratives since last fall, and the latest offerings include a video purporting to show Haitians illegally voting for Kamala Harris in Georgia, and a viral video of someone ripping up ballots for Trump in Pennsylvania. That video appears to feature West African actors posing as Black Americans destroying a pile of ballots, and the content was posted on an account linked to Storm 1516. Jumpy Pisces, a North Korean hacking group, appears to have teamed up with an outside ransomware gang for the first time. Officials say Pisces appears to have joined forces with Play, a closed ransomware group that first came on the scene in 2023. It's been linked to dozens of attacks against governments in Europe and the U.S. Unit 42, a team of Palo Alto Networks researchers, said they found that Jumpy Pisces was harvesting personal details and blinding sensors that detected suspicious activity before deploying ransomware built by Play. Researchers are still trying to figure out whether Jumpy Pisces was selling initial access broker services or is actually working with the Play ransomware gang to launch attacks.
Russia, like so many other countries, has a messy history of flip-flopping when it comes to crypto.
Just months after legalizing crypto mining, the Russian government has done an about-face and banned mining in regions of Russia that are low on electricity. According to Russia's Deputy Minister of Energy, crypto miners in Russia's Far East, Southwest Siberia, and southern Russia have used up all the available power capacity. They're gobbling up so much energy that new consumers can't access the grid until 2030 at the earliest. The numbers tell the story. Just in the past 2 years, crypto miners have increased their energy consumption by 14%. Russia isn't abandoning crypto altogether, though. The Kremlin is looking to allow the country's central bank to create some sort of crypto instrument that can be used in cross-border transactions. The idea is to get around sanctions.
A former Disney World employee is accused of hacking into software used by the theme park's restaurants and changing allergen information on menus.
The happiest place on Earth just got a little more sinister. A former Disney World employee allegedly hacked into the software used by the theme park's restaurants and methodically removed all its peanut allergy warnings. Disney had fired the suspected employee back in June, and then, about a month later, started noticing problems with its menu software. They figured out the problem was linked to some unauthorized intrusions in their network. The suspect in the case had been working as the menu production manager. Disney, for its part, has changed all its passwords, and an FBI investigation is continuing. And finally, gamers in Tajikistan got tough news last week. The government banned the video games Grand Theft Auto and Counter-Strike for its elements of violence, murder, and robbery. Tajikistan officials say they worry the game's propaganda of cruelty is adding to adolescent crime. The Ministry of Internal Affairs said local computer clubs should be on alert. Authorities intend to conduct raids to ensure these bans are being followed.
Today's episode was produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gaida, and me, Jade Abdul Malik. It was edited by Karen Duffin, fact-checked by Darren Ankrum, and contains original music by Ben Livingston, with some other music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, and our illustrator is Megan Goff. Martin Peralta is our sound designer and engineer. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News. We'll have a new episode of Click Here on Friday. We'll see you then.